Good morning, Ask a Christian friends and family. It's Amy here, and I want to welcome you back to Ask a Christian Live. We're doing testimonies again today, and I am joined today by my friend Marianne Gil-Lian, who is going to talk about some of the ways that God has been present with her through her struggle, personal struggle and grief with cancer, and also with helping her deal with losing her parents to cancer. So if there's someone that you know who is struggling with this, we want to be with you today, and we want to encourage you today. And we also want to give a place for you to have somebody to pray with you and pour out what's going on. It's not an expectation of joy every time. I want to let you know that's okay. Before I bring Marianne in here, I want to thank some of our new subscribers on Facebook. I just saw that you joined, and so I didn't write your names down. And I want to also thank Sabari Nathan for joining on YouTube. And we just welcome you to the community. We want Ask a Christian to be a place for new believers, for people who have questioned their faith, to have a safe place to explore together. And so we welcome all of you here today. And now I want to bring on Marianne so you can see her face. She's working from home today. Marianne is a professional and a mother. And Marianne, would you tell us a little bit about what you have done traditionally for dollars and a little bit about you?
Okay, so I have had a journey in my life with jobs. I'm still kind of growing up, you would say, searching for the right job, but it started out as I graduated from law school and I passed the bar in the 90s, so I'm kind of old. I was looking for work. I actually had an offer with the Attorney General's office in Sacramento. I went to law school in Sacramento, and it was at that time I actually found out I was pregnant with my eldest, Marissa. So my husband and I decided I wouldn't work and I would just stay with having a baby, which was really out of the realm for me because I actually thought I was going to be a career woman. I didn't even want children. I was like, oh, what do I do with this baby? But 4 years later, I had a second one. And at that point, I just thought, you know what, I'm kind of enjoying this mother stuff. So I did get a job for a little bit at Oracle. I worked in their mergers and acquisitions department for about 5 years. And then I got pregnant with my third child, Nate. We decided, no, this isn't going to work out of me going to work full time. So took a step back and stayed home for many years. And that's when I got very involved with the little Christian school here in Los Altos called Mariannes. And I taught music there for about 8 years. I did music for K through third graders. I did musicals and I taught piano. So fast forward to 2017, my son left Mariannes as the last graduate of our family. And at that point, I thought, okay, it's time for me to move on. So I started thinking about going back to my law degree, and I was still an active member of the bar. I did have a real estate license. I've been doing that as well. So I've been practicing real estate with my mother-in-law, who's a broker. Do a few sales here and there, but nothing huge.
Not a super aggressive.
Yeah, not huge. So in 2018 or so, I did get a job at a law firm in San Mateo doing estate planning, and I was doing document review, just kind of small things. Did that for 8 or 9 months, and it wasn't working out. Part of it was the commute to San Mateo from where I live. I was driving 2 to 3 hours a day, so that wasn't working for me.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah. So, and then things happen, and we'll get to that later. But at this point in my life, I actually am still doing real estate. I have a client or two, and I have my broker's license as well now. And I started doing estate planning for my home. So I'm doing trusts and wills and advanced healthcare, directives, power of attorney for people. So that's kind of where I'm at now. And I can do it from home. This is actually my little office, and I can go to clients' homes or whatnot. So it works out pretty well.
That's nice. It's such a service.
Yeah.
Marianne, tell me a little bit about how you grew up. Did you grow up in a Christian home? Was it seriously Christian? Like, give me a little bit of the spectrum.
It was seriously Christian. My parents both immigrated from Mexico, and both respectively from different parts of Mexico had already converted from Catholicism to being Protestant. My mom in northern Mexico, my dad in another part of Mexico. My dad came over as a teenager. My mom was very young. She was maybe 12 or 13. Came to Sacramento. They ended up meeting at the Sacramento Seventh-day Adventist Spanish Church, which is how I was raised in that environment. And it says nothing about Spanish churches in general, but this one in particular was very, very conservative, very traditional. So I did the Christian Academy, I did Christian camps, I did choirs, I did your mainstream Christian environment. My friends
were all up in there.
All in there.
What was your favorite? I mean, was it social for you too? What was your favorite fun thing about being in that congregation?
It was fun. And looking back, we were poor. My mom was a nurse. She had gone to college here and became a registered nurse, but my dad didn't make a lot of money. And I mean, we were in a poor neighborhood. The church was in a poor neighborhood, but it was so much fun. Every week, at least when I was little, we would go to church, and it was in the Spanish church, it tends to be an all-day affair. You don't go out to eat. You have potluck, and you stay for church meetings. You sing in choirs. The children, we would roam around the neighborhoods. It was fun. Some of my best friends came from that church, and
that's so cool.
So yeah, and then the school too was just good people.
Let's fast forward to your relationship with God as an adult, and how your faith was challenged when you first heard that your mom or dad, whoever was diagnosed first, had cancer. What were you doing? What was your faith life like?
Okay.
And take me to that day.
Okay. So, going back to college, I went to a Christian college for a couple of years, but then I transferred out of there. I went to a more secular, I went to UCLA, and I became very active in cultural things more than Christian things. So I kind of left the church for many, many years. I did not walk into a church, I would say, through college and law school, and even through the marriage early on, until we had our daughter Marissa. And then my husband and I both decided, we should start introducing her to Sabbath school or Sunday school, the equivalent. But at that point, I was loosely involved with the church. And it was during my pregnancy with my son that my dad started feeling ill. My parents never were sick. As when we were children, they just healthy as a horse. My dad was always the big, larger than life type of guy, tall guy. I'm kind of short. My dad was over 6 foot. If you saw him, you would not think he was my dad, but he was, as far as I know. So when I was pregnant, my sister and I I have one sister, and we were both expecting boys, due a month apart. And my dad was going in and out of a hospital, losing weight, looking really pale. And we couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. They gave him at one point a diagnosis of idiopathic something, which meant they didn't know what was going on with him. Finally, at some point, they figured out it was what's called non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I'm young, I'm like early 30s or whatnot. And I go with him. I live here in the Bay Area. They live in Sacramento. I drive out there, attend doctor's appointments with them. So I remember the day they told us what he had and the stage he was in, because stupid me, they say non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I'm trying to be all smart. Oh, what stage is he? Of course, in my head, I didn't really know stages. So the doctor kind of looked sad, and he said, well, your dad's in stage 4. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't know. I didn't know if there were 8 stages or
out of what? Yeah, 4 out of what?
It's 4. I guess 4 is the worst. Which I know now, but at that time I didn't. So, but my mom was a nurse, so she knew right away, and she looked at me, didn't say anything, and we left. And my dad knew. I think he knew anyway. But by the grace of God, and I think that's when I started really focusing on. I've got to go to church and I've got to pray. I remember when I went home and I researched stage 4, and my mom told me, it was like a knife to my chest. I literally could have fallen on the floor. I felt like I'd been stabbed. like that, because my dad was 62 and his father lived to be 95, 96. So I assume longevity in him
Right.
and my mom.
The
So
genes, he's going to be around for a while.
his mom lived to be 90, his dad 96. He's 62.
Yeah.
And I go home and I'm researching stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it's not looking good. So I started doing things thinking I can pray this away. I can make bargains with God. Actually, that was the point where I started running. I run now. I don't have a runner's body, but I actually got pretty involved in running. I actually ran a marathon. I ran a few half marathons, and I got involved with Team in Training, which was the Leukemia Lymphoma Society for running. And I think as I go on runs, I think in my head, talk to God, pray to God. If I do this, if I run this marathon, my dad won't die. So that was in my head. And, you know, by the grace of God as well, I was able to raise enough money, because you do raise money for a cause. And I raised enough money to bring my parents with me to Hawaii. I did the Honolulu Marathon. And just to have my dad at the finish line, again, just, okay, God's going to heal him, because I'm doing this. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm making things happen. So, and you know what God did? God somehow guided his doctors to try something very new in the market called immunotherapy, which now everyone knows. At the time, it was kind of an unheard of thing. So they put him on a regimen. They did chemo, and then they did something called rituximab, which is a monoclonal antibody immunotherapy. It worked. It worked on my dad, and he lived 10 years where he was great. He was on remission. We went on trips. He golfed. He was a golfer. He golfed every day. My parents had a care home in Sacramento. They had a few care homes at one point, but they were down to the one, and he was still working. And then when he turned 72, 10 years later, 72, 73, he started showing signs that it was returning. So it did return with a vengeance. And by the time he turned 74, it was end stage. And they tried palliative care, and they were keeping him alive for a while with platelet transfusions. And that was another, I remember being in the hospital with him. He would lie in a bed, and they would transfuse platelets in him. And a physician came in and said to my mom and I, we really need to talk about the next step. We can't give him platelets every single day, because it's not curing him. And anyway, so long story short, that was pretty much the beginning of the end. We lost him in September of 2014. And it was, I've talked about this before, but it was a beautiful ending. We had a room full of family. My brother and sister and I held his hand. My mom kind of held his head. And I had family in there, including a cousin who's a minister, who we sang to him his favorite hymns. We read scripture, and my cousin prayed for him, and he died right after I think that prayer ended. Honestly, I hate to say, if you haven't seen somebody pass away, it can be a very beautiful thing. And it was really beautiful with my dad. It's almost like seeing a birth, somebody taking its first breath. Seeing a death is seeing that last breath be taken. And so that was very beautiful. And we left that thinking, okay, well, God was good to us, gave us those extra 10 years.
Yeah.
He should have lived 20 more, but 74, not bad.
Right.
For 94, but that didn't happen. So at that point, we kind of embraced my mom, surrounded my mom. My mom was a very strong woman. She's kind of ran the house there, but it took a toll on her, and she was still working, had her business, healthy, so we thought. And 3 months later, she started feeling sick, and she became diagnosed herself with lymphoma, not even 6 months from my dad's passing. So,
Marianne, let me back you up just a second. I want to follow up with what was going on with your running and your bargaining with God and your faith. Did that ever resolve itself? Or when your dad passed, did you ever look at that and think that it was silly? Or did that come, was that something that happened later? Or why can you talk about it looking back, knowing that wasn't actually how God works?
Yeah, think I thought of it as silly. I think if anything, yeah, I know God, I know now that that's not how God works, but I think at the time it was reassuring to me. It was giving me something. It was giving me an outlet. And I never blamed God, even when it came back and my dad got very ill again. I wasn't like, oh, should I? And I actually kept running. I ran a half marathon about a month after he died. But it was still not, it was never targeted at God. So it was more a reassurance, I think, for me. So maybe me telling myself, let's see what I can do. I can make a bargain with God, but I know this is not really how it works. I know it's not a bargain.
So you weren't putting all of your faith eggs in that one basket.
I wasn't. I'm a pretty positive person anyway. Usually I'm pretty much always glass half full. So I think if that's not working, I switched to another positive thought. And I think I did at some point. Although fast forward to my mom getting diagnosed, that was, oh God, what are you doing here? Because she's diagnosed with lymphoma as well. Although he had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, she's diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 4. By then I knew what stage 4 meant.
Right.
Yeah, right. But
for me again.
Yeah, researching, Hodgkin's lymphoma, people live on, people are okay. People survive this. She lived a year and a half and she was gone. So it went fast, and she was not the most positive of people. My dad was. I honestly think that can make a difference when you're facing some type of illness that you've got to fight. You've got to have a great attitude or be positive about it. My mom was not. From the day she was diagnosed, she was like, oh, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. So that was hard. That was a really hard, trying to, talk to God about that was very difficult because I felt,
Take me to that conversation with God. What were you saying to him? What were you asking him that was different than with your dad?
Well, I think it was more out of desperation because not everyone, but many people are very close to their mothers, and I was. My mom was one of my best friends. I spoke to her, if not every day, every week, a few times a week. We were very close. She was a brilliant woman. Both my parents, brilliant people, immigrants from Mexico that could beat me at Scrabble. I went to law school and they would beat me at Scrabble. So my mom loved politics. Anyone in my family knows she just a bleeding heart liberal, and we would have long conversations about politics. So when I found out she was sick, this time there was no, I'm going to go for a run, I'm going to bargain. No, this was sheer desperation. God, do not take her. Do not take my mom. You already took my dad. Please, please. She was older than my dad. At diagnosis, she was already 76. So she was older than my dad anyway, but her mom lived to be almost 90, 89. Again, we have longevity. My mom was an Adventist, was healthy. She made her own granola and gluten, never drank, never smoked, neither of them ever. What are you doing, God? At that point, I wasn't angry, but I was like, okay, I was a little confused. What's going on here? You took my dad.
Everything right. Are there not rewards for doing everything right?
Exactly. And my mom, they were churchgoers. My mom was heavily involved in the church for a long time. My dad was a head elder. My mom was church treasurer. God, what are you doing? Where's the reward? So that definitely was a lot of desperation prayers and, God, don't, please, please, a lot of begging. But I think, I knew deep down as the year progressed and chemo wasn't working, they tried immunotherapy as well. That wasn't working. It would go away for a while, but it would come back within a month. Her weight was just declining. She was just looking like your typical bad cancer patient. So we knew, and 2016, we lost her on Thanksgiving morning. So that kind of put a damper on Thanksgiving in our family. But it was also like my mom to die on Thanksgiving morning to make sure we did not forget her. So that was very much like her. And what was another thing with the relationship, my parents and God, my dad was he was resigned and resolved that if death came, he was ready. And we would talk about it, and he would look at all of us and say, I have had a great life. I am ready. I know I'm going to see you again. He was very positive that Jesus would raise him and we would all be together. Flip side, my mom was the exact opposite. It was always questioning, what if everything I was taught wasn't right? What if everything I did won't bring me to heaven? What if I don't see you guys again? What if there is no Jesus and there is no second coming and this is it? Very, very negative towards the end. In fact, I mean, even her like my dad, last words were beautiful. His last words, he looked at my mom and said, "Give me a kiss," in Spanish. My mom's were very different. She didn't say anything nice. It was very hard.
Well, you've got me curious now. Is it inappropriate, or is it something you just don't want to say? Like, because if it's inappropriate,
what my mom said, her last words.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't inappropriate. It was in Spanish to her. I had actually, it was my son's birthday when she fell in a coma, and I left her side to drive home to the Bay Area to take my son to dinner. And so right when I left, she, within an hour, she looked at her sister who was at her bedside and said in Spanish, "Me muero," which means I'm going to die. And those were her last words. And she was kind of not super happy about it, as who would be. And maybe because she was a nurse, she knew her body had everything was depleting. And she ended up going into a coma, and she died 2 days later, Thanksgiving morning. So it was either she was going to die on my son's birthday or Thanksgiving. So,
well, when we all get to heaven, let's razz her a little bit about that.
I will razz her.
Oh man. Well, I love that you can find humor in those last words. I'm wondering if you think that your dad's peace was reflective of his relationship with God, and your mom's questioning was reflective of hers, or of her living right, but not knowing Jesus as much, or as a personal friend. Did you see that in their lives?
It's hard to say, because from the outer appearances, you would have thought my mom she was definitely the more religious one. She was definitely the Bible reader. My dad kind of lived by the moment. He was an easygoing guy, golfed, and he wasn't a church goer. And towards the end, my dad had stopped going to church, actually. But in his heart, as he would express, church was just a building. And he found God in nature. I know both of them found God in nature. They both were animal lovers and gardeners, and taught me a lot about all of that. And that's where they felt their connection, especially my dad. So my mom, I don't know what happened. She was just not the most positive of people anyway. So I don't know if it just with the cancer, and maybe it had gone into her brain at some point, which I think it had, actually. So I don't know if it was just a combination of different things that were happening physically in her body, or physiologically, or whatnot. But yeah, so I try not to look at the lifespan of her life in those moments, because for the most part, she was a very religious person who did everything to send the three of us, my brother, sister, and I, to Christian schools and everything else.
Yeah, I think that's important to bring up. I really, people can get so worried, wondering if this or that is a reflection of the state of somebody's heart or their salvation. And I think hearing you say that reminds me of the grace of God. Like, if he doesn't see them struggling, if he doesn't see their sickness, if he doesn't see that cancer affects you in so many ways, and you think that that's the thing that determines whether or not they've been walking with God, that could send somebody into a tailspin. So I'm so glad you brought that up, just to give people some peace and comfort that your relationship with God is an overall trajectory, not who you are when you're sick and affected by chemicals, or, know.
Good
so
point.
Yeah, thank you for that. Let's move on to your diagnosis, because now we've walked with you a little bit. We know that you've seen cancer. We know you've seen what it can do, and you've struggled for your family, and now it hits you. Take me to that day.
Well, that's more recent, so I may have to cry on this story.
I have my tissue.
I have tissue ready, but so just a year ago, yeah, who would have thunk? Here I'd just taken care of 2 parents on hospice with cancer, held both their hands. And then one day in April of 2019, so a year ago, is this a family show? Because I had breast cancer, and the way it was found is that I found it myself taking a shower. I tended to do my own little self-exams because that's what you're taught. I had been educated that, you want to prevent this. So I'm in the shower and I feel something and I'm like, oh, that feels different. Feels like a marble. Call my doctor. She says it's probably nothing. You're young, you're healthy, but come in. So I come in and she feels it and she's like, oh yeah, that feels a little interesting. It's probably some type of cyst fibroid, but let's get you into a mammo and ultrasound. And I'd been having regular mammos. I'd had some ultrasounds. So it wasn't that this was anything new. They couldn't take me right away. I remember that it was a week or 2 until the mammo. And then I had the mammo and the tech says, where do you feel it? They kind of take a Sharpie and they mark your skin. She does the mammo and she says, well, I don't see anything, but your doctor felt it. So, and she ordered an ultrasound. So let me send you there. And meanwhile, my head's on what am I going to have for lunch today? And who's going to pick up Nate from basketball or whatnot? I had not a remote possibility in my mind that it was anything. But from the mammo, they walked me straight into ultrasound. So it's very efficient. I lie down again. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to have sushi. They do an ultrasound.
You remember thinking that you're going to have sushi?
Seriously, I'm near a sushi place that I like. That's what I'm thinking. So they do the ultrasound and the tech leaves the room and has me dressed and says, oh, you need to speak to the radiologist. And I'm still like, okay, whatever. I walk into her office and she has this look that I've only seen when my parents are told that they had cancer. I mean, that look from a doctor. Nothing against the doctors. I think it's just an automatic sympathy type of response. And she is very calmly and quietly says, we need to get you into a surgical biopsy. This doesn't look good. And I'm like, what doesn't look good? I mean, I really thought it was nothing. There would be no chance in any which way that it was anything. So my husband had been traveling and he was, I think, in Minnesota that day. And so the radiologist wouldn't give me specific information, but I could tell by her face. She knew by the look, the size, the shape of it, what it was without saying it. So she immediately we schedule surgical biopsy or whatever, and I leave. And I immediately go to my car and I call my husband and I'm crying. And he's like, what's going on? And I don't think I'd even said to him I had a mammo that day because it really was a nothing to me. Wow. So I tell him, oh my goodness, I just had a mammo and an ultrasound and I think I might have breast cancer. And he's like, what? No, you don't. There's no way. I mean, not what after we've gone through, you do not have cancer. Don't worry. It's not cancer. So
kind of an overarching feeling of God would not let me have cancer.
Exactly. That's exactly how my husband felt. And so again, I am positive. So I went home, prayed every day about it, spoke to family, and I'm very transparent. So I called my family, my sister, my brother. I don't have parents to call anymore, but everyone I'm close to, I tell them, you've got to pray on this Tuesday. I have a surgical biopsy. And they think it could be breast cancer by the size and shape, but please pray it's not. So fast forward to that, I think it was a week or 2 later, I think a week later. And my husband and I had a flight that same day as the biopsy to go to Southern California to visit our middle daughter, who was in college in Orange County. And I had asked my physician, is it okay to fly after this procedure? And he had said, yes, no problem. So I am very, very nervous. I go in, I think at 8 a.m. This is way more serious than an ultrasound. They give you an injection to numb your skin. They tear out a piece of your skin. They pull things out. It's not painless. So
You remember that operation game that you had as a
I
kid?
felt that way. And I'm lying on I guess a gurney type of thing, whatever they use in the surgical center. And they have me cushioned in this really cool, I don't know what you call it, but it's like an air mattress under me. So I think it raises part of me so he can, get precisely to where he needs to be. And here's something I had shared with you earlier in a conversation you and I had. As the physician is cutting into me, and I am the biggest wimp with blood and needles and everything like that. So I'm in my head, and previously the Sabbath before that procedure, at my church, in our praise team, I think my eldest daughter Marissa sang that day, but one of the members she sang with was a guy named Gabe Silva, who you've interviewed already, I think, and he's got just a beautiful voice. And that Sabbath before my procedure, he was singing a song. Oh, what is the name? It's a Michael W. Smith song, and I wrote it down. Oh, Christ Be All Around Me is the title. Thank you. And in my head, I'm lying there, and I think because I had a nurse above me, a doctor below me, my husband was not allowed in the room, a tech to my left and right. And in my song in my head over and over is Gabe Silva singing, above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me, above and below me, before and behind me. It just kept going in my head over and over and over, just the chorus. And it was Gabe's beautiful voice singing that. And it gave me, I was able to get through that procedure, and I was so comforted by that. And I walked out, and again, I thought, well, this is a sign that it's going to be nothing. They're going to pull that skin out, and they're going to say it's benign. You're going to be fine. It didn't turn out that way, but in the moment, God worked in Gabe, who 2 days before sang that, came back into me, and that gave me so much comfort. And so they did give me little stitches, sewed me up. I left. I flew to Southern Cal, and it was 2 days later I was in Southern Cal when they called with the results. And that was a whole other story. That's a whole other story. So yeah.
Now, you don't have to divulge anything that you don't want to, but where are you now in the diagnosis? Where are you in the physical battle?
So, and here's where God comes back. When I found out I had cancer, they don't tell you what stage at all. They don't give you much information at the beginning. All you hear is the word cancer, which is like a beacon flashing. And especially because I'd already gone through this twice. I know what cancer means. I know what it's about. I know what happens to the body. So that's all I heard over and over in my head. But God in his wisdom, he made that stage 1 cancer. So I wasn't stage 3 or 4. I was stage 1. I was told so many times by many doctors, you were so lucky you caught it. Eventually, the mammo didn't catch it, and the ultrasound did. They said if I hadn't found it, a mammo would have caught it at one point, but it would have been a year or two later, and it would have been probably more advanced. But because it was stage 1, fortunately, the procedures I had to go through, I did have surgery, I had radiation. Right now, I take a pill every day, and I will for 5 years. So easy. So easy. I've been so blessed that it could have been so much worse, and it is so much worse for many, many, many people, including people I know.
Here's again the advertisement for self-check.
Yeah,
advertisement for getting the mammo.
Women know your bodies.
Yeah, so we'll reinforce that. That's great news for somebody who gets to go to church with you and have you in my social circle. But like you said, that's not everybody's story.
Right.
I want to know a little bit about what you would say to people how could they find the strength to praise if they didn't have it this good? Like, where's the point in being Christian if, like, sorrow, like sea billows roll, like we sing, if cancer or whatever it is just keeps coming at you, coming at your family, how have you found the strength to praise? And what would you say to people who aren't on this side of the diagnosis?
Right. It's hard. It's definitely a time. My husband has told me many times, I can't believe you're so okay to go back to church or go to church, and you don't blame God, and you don't find fault with any of this. You see the positive in it. And maybe because I am stage 1 and I'm blessed there, but that's not to say it won't come back. Cancer often does come back. So I still have to be very mindful that this journey may not be over. But it gave me so much, just perception in life, just appreciation of everything around me. I, I mean, I've always loved music and loved hiking and being outdoors, but I just enjoy it so much more now. And things go in my head that, okay, so, if it comes back and I don't live to see my daughters get married, it's okay, because I saw them graduate from high school and I have seen one graduate from college. And so it just gives you a perception of you've got to appreciate every moment in life. And
you're celebrating the milestones with fervor.
That's right. And then also, because I did see my parents' death, being with them when they died was a very beautiful act, even though that sounds morbid, but it was. Yeah. And just, there is some beauty in that. And I think too, I thought in my head, okay, if it doesn't go the way I'd like it to go, and it's it for me, it's okay. Cause I saw how it was with my parents, and I would be that for my children. And just the hope of, if I die, it's okay. Cause the next face I'll see is Jesus. And then after that, I'm going to see my mom and dad. So I think I kept going there, that this is okay. This is just a little blip in history, and it's nothing. So, I mean, I guess that's what I would say to people. Just find beauty in everything around you. Find beauty in life, because life is short.
I think this will be one of our final questions, unless one of our viewers wants to ask something. But ultimately, how has your view of God been challenged? How has your view of God improved, been challenged or improved, suffered, etc., throughout this journey, from coming back to church, going through all of this with your parents, and then through your own diagnosis? Tell me how you've grown in your faith.
So I definitely feel closer to my church. There were people in my church. I have friends that were so gracious and respectful, but they would come over and they would send me things. And I think that's big too. If you find a friend who's been diagnosed with whatever, reach out to them. It everything, even if it's a text. One of my best friends is in North Carolina, and I think she would text me every day for a while there, and just send me little, messages. And so and she was also from Sunnyvale Church originally. So it brought me definitely closer to my church. I've always loved music, but now I sit in the pews, and just the music just touches me. The words, there's one song, I mean, all the songs, but there's a few, but there's one, what a beautiful name it is, the name of Jesus. I just start crying if I hear that. And I didn't before. I mean, I heard that song many times before, and it didn't affect me. But I think after my own cancer diagnosis, it really just touches me, just thinking of Jesus and his name and his face, and what I'd love to lay eyes on him one day. And so it just really, I just want to be in the pew, listening to the music, listening to the word, being more involved. I think that's when I stepped up to help. I mean, I think I taught Sabbath school classrooms for the little ones for a long time. At one time, I think I directed Vacation Bible School a long time ago at Sunnyvale.
That's a
But,
good time.
you know,
Yeah.
I left for a while doing all that. I needed a break. I had been so involved with Miramani and Sunnyvale, I just needed a break. But
Right.
now I'm like, okay, I had my break, and God's like, get in there, go help out. So now I'm involved again.
All right. Final question. And this is not meant to be negative. It's meant to help anybody who is watching, who has a friend go through this and doesn't know what to do. Are there any places where your friends or family let you down or stepped on your toes, or, even in their well-meaningness, just didn't know what to do? And what would you have done differently? Let us know. How can we care for our members grieving from loss of cancer or their own battle?
I think for the most part, everybody did the right thing, and because the right thing is subjective. It's what each person feels. I remember one thing that was a little bit of an annoyance, and not even a huge annoyance. It's very minor. But when people heard that I was, even before I said I had stage 1, if they heard breast cancer, oh, you're going to be fine. People live with breast cancer for years. And that is their way of comfort. But I would take it like, don't say
You don't know that.
You don't know. Who are you, psychic? You don't know I'm going to be fine. So I think even though you want to say that to give a person a hope, I think you also need to acknowledge that the word cancer is a scary thing, no matter what stage you're in.
Right.
And give the person a little bit of reassurance that I am with you. I will pray with you. I will pray for you. I will be there for you. Instead of just there's I guess a little bit of too much positivity. So
Right.
I think that kind of I would change that if anything.
Yeah. That's good. That's a really good help. Any other resources that helped you out as you were going through this, or I'm sure.
I'm blessed with just a great group of friends. And 2 days after my surgery, a group of girlfriends took me to Carmel, and we had 2 nights in a cabin thing they rented. And if you're a friend to someone and this happens to them, be there for them. Go out of your way, take them out. I was kind of sore and stitched up, and I was like, really? I don't know if I want to go, but it was one of the best weekends of my life. So just
living it up.
So resources, count on your friends, call your friends, talk to your friends. Don't hide it from your friends. You've got to talk it out. You've got to tell people. And even though I know it's a little bit of a private, not everybody's that way. Many people are very private. But that helped me to speak it out, to tell people, get a hug. Hugs are great. We can't hug right now. It's COVID-19. We can't hug. But when we can hug again, hug people. It really means everything.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Marianne, for your time. And thank you for those of you who are watching at home and will watch in the future. I just want to let you know that Ask a Christian has volunteers who would love to pray for you in your cancer journey, in your cancer battle. If you are in Sunnyvale, California, I want you to know that we're local. Not that prayers mean more when you're close together, but if you need a community, I am wanting to pray with and for you. If you're wanting to get closer to God during this time, I'm here to study with you and support you. Lisa Mitchell says, we love Marianne. Thank you for sharing your story. But thank you guys so much. And I do want to let you know that we will be back on Friday at 11 Pacific with a Mother's Day special. So please come hang out with us again, subscribe, and hit the notifications button so that you can know when we go live. We're going to do 12 questions you should be asking your mother if you still have the privilege of having her in your life. We want to make the most of it. So again, thank you to Marianne, and we appreciate you, your authenticity, your willingness to share and glorify God with your story. Thanks so much. And we'll see you next time. Marianne, stick around. I'm going to end this broadcast and we can